My name is Kellen Elliott McRae. Until a few weeks ago, I was the CTO at Etsy. I want to thank you for having me here. Whoa, that's nope. All right, sorry, those are coming up. Still getting used to this. All right, back. All right. Thank you all for having me here. I am not a civic or gov tech practitioner, though many years ago as an activist, I did spend a few years trying to figure out how you overthrow governments with technology unsuccessfully. But we've been thinking about some of the same problems. And today I want to talk a little bit about one of the other key themes of my work, which is this idea of how you organize engineering teams and software projects to build sustainable long-term change in the world. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I'll tip my hand and say, I think one of the most important things that you can do, probably one of the first things you do, is you need to create a diverse, inclusive learning culture. And so that's what we're going to talk about today for the next 15 minutes. Great. Why? So first, culture is hard, and it's not what any of us are here to do. And so often culture is sort of made up out of the perks and sort of the other random parts of a company. So why are we going to focus on culture? I also get asked some other why questions. Why is software so hard to build? Why is it so expensive? And why are programmers so expensive? And all of these questions are the same question for me, or at least they all have the same answer. And that's, we are fundamentally bad at building software. And I don't mean I'm bad at it, or you're bad at it, or the people in this room are bad at it, and somewhere out there, maybe in industry, there is someone who's good at it. And if we could only get them to tell us how to build software, we'd be enlightened. No, we are bad at it as a species. And I'm not going to linger too long on why. I have some theories about why we're so bad at it, but those are really sort of late night and hard liquor territory. But there are at least two contributing factors that really impact how we think about organizing ourselves, and I'm going to talk about those briefly. The first is it's just hard. Modern software development is a complex, collaborative, improvisational, real-time, long-time scale, creative aesthetic pursuit. It's like if a band or a dance troupe or a sports team had to get up every day, and instead of practicing, they played, they performed. Each day, day in and day out, weeks at a time, months at a time, years at a time, and we evaluated them at the end of that time scale on how well they are, on their entire collective output. That's what software development is like. And we don't have great models for this. We've tried industrial models, we've tried military models, we've tried not having any models. None of those have worked terribly well. So really got to point it at that. The other sort of key contributing factor is the rate of change. It's almost banal to talk about how fast technology changes at this point. I have a supercomputer in my pocket that sort of would have fit into 2 buildings 20 years ago. But we haven't actually entirely incorporated into our thinking as organizations what that rate of change means. The fundamental laws of what are and are not possible change 2 to 3 times a decade right now as technology organizations. If you could imagine architects who had to deal with new laws of physics 2 to 3 times a decade, they would not be as good at building buildings. They certainly would not be up to earthquake code. So, and I don't say this to sort of generate sympathy, but it does lead us to, come on, Kellen's second law of software development. Your answers are wrong, or they will be soon. And what that means is we're not in pursuit of the right answer anymore as organizations, as teams. We're not looking for the right product or the right technology choice. We are on a voyage of continual discovery. As a team, collaboratively, creatively, hopefully cognitively diverse, we are constantly on this voyage of discovery. By the way, the first law of software development is never build a CMS. No good can come of it. So what does it mean to build for the long term? In this sort of environment, building long-term sustainable, it's not about cement and stone and being impervious in the face of time. It's about getting really good at change, which means you need a culture of learning. And if I was smart, I'd just stop here. I've said some potentially funny and sort of provocative things, and I hadn't had to get my hands dirty. But I've got a little bit more time. So let's talk about how you actually promote learning in an engineering organization, in a technology organization. And first, we have to look at what is holding us back from having a learning culture. Some of these behaviors may seem familiar. Some of them may not. But I think a few of them will. Firing people for making mistakes. failing to hold people accountable for outcomes, blaming failure on human error, blaming forces outside of our control. Nothing we could have done about it. Thrash. Having people have to change teams and focus interrupts learning. Also letting people go off quietly for months at a time, put their headphones on, not ship anything, not have conversations. Learning is not happening in that environment. Novelty. This is something we see a lot in industry. I want to solve it with the latest and greatest technology, the coolest thing. You don't develop learning if you're constantly changing and tracing the latest and greatest. Similarly, if you underinvest in your technology stack, you can have lots of great insights floating around there, but if you're not putting them back into your system, you're not learning. Optimizing locally. I'm just going to solve it for me and my team. Autocratic decision making. I don't care if it's the CEO, the ED, the smartest person in the room, the loudest person in the room. If you allow autocratic decision making to happen, learning is going to be interrupted. Similarly, if no one can make a decision, if no one has the ability to make a decision and make it stick, there is no clarity being added to the environment. And finally, assholes, and that's a technical term. Yeah. So these are some of the behaviors that sort of undermine learning. So what are the things that we can do that actually support learning? When I do this talk internally at Etsy, I give this wonky 14 steps to optimize for learning. That feels like a bit much to go into today. So we're just going to break it into 4 quadrants of behavior. Sorry for the folks taking a picture of that. You can sort of see it in the background of these colored squares. And this is still not a checklist. This is not 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, I'm done. This is a cycle. You go through it over and over again, pick a quadrant, any quadrant, and go around clockwise. So let's start with confidently take risks. And sort of in each of these quadrants, we're going to talk a little bit about what we mean and the key question we need to be thinking about while we're in that quadrant. So to do our jobs and to learn anything, we need to take risks. We need to try to make change in the world. So the question is, what is the largest risk we can take? What is the largest single change we can make to our technology systems that we can do with near perfect confidence? Confidence that we're not going to break it, and confidence that we're going to understand the impact of that change, both sort of operationally and on behavior. So hold that in your mind. What is the single largest change you could make for those of you who work on technology systems? All right, who in the audience feels confident that they could make any change at all to their system without breaking it? All right, I see one hand, and I would love to talk to you later. And for whom among you is there simply no change you could make to the system where you would have confidence? A few more hands. All right, that sounds about right. And for the rest of you, you're somewhere on that spectrum. And so the question is, what gives you that confidence? There are lots of behaviors that can gain confidence in sort of modern software development. Training, QA, monitoring metrics, code reviews, ramp-ups, user studies, thinking the change is trivial or routine. That's an anti-pattern. Don't do that. And your confidence doesn't have to be perfect. When Etsy started moving to a continuous deployment environment, we had no confidence in our tests. We had, in fact, just deleted them. And we had no confidence in our code. We had inherited it from some brilliant but crazy folks who were no longer with the organization. And we just had 5 graphs. And those 5 graphs were sort of how many people were signing up, how many people were logging in, how many items were being listed for sale, how many items were actually selling, and how fast were people complaining in the bugs forum. And those graphs gave us enough confidence to start making change. It's not about perfect confidence. It's about good confidence in small changes and then getting better at it over time. So we made a change. We had confidence. We were highly skilled. There were things that gave us confidence, and yet surprise happened anyways. Who here, again, people who work on technology, has deployed a change that couldn't possibly break the site, and yet it broke everything? Yeah. Yeah, we have an award that we give at Etsy each year to the person who most spectacularly breaks the site. It's called the 3-Armed Sweater Award. And yeah. And we tend to, the last few years, give it to the person who most spectacularly broke the site in the most innocuous possible way. The CSS change that sort of caused the infinite loop that took the site down for 3 hours, sort of, Surprise happens. It is inevitable. So here's the question, and this is the hardest part about all of this. What is it about the environment in which you made the change? You had confidence. You made the change, and it gave you false confidence. When something goes wrong, we tend to blame ourselves. I just fucked up. Maybe I'm not very good. I wasn't paying attention. Human error. That's useless. It's irrelevant. I don't care that you think you fucked up. That doesn't help me improve the environment in which we're operating. We need to get beyond blaming ourselves and think about what about the environment gave me false confidence to make this change. There are some practices that help with this. There's 5 whys. There's blameless postmortems. Etsy's written about blameless postmortems extensively. I recommend reading it. This is a really hard question. We don't think this way about our work, and it's really important. Also, a word about detection. One of the most common sources of surprise is that it took us a while to figure out that we had made a mistake. This is a whole class of surprise that we run into over and over again. The site's been broken for days, weeks, months, years. How could we possibly not have known? Are we amateurs here? Surprise and detection are a really interesting set of things. Prevention's impossible. You are always going to make mistakes in software. There is always going to be surprise. It is the nature of complex systems. But if you can get good at detection, if you can quickly detect that the system is not working the way you expected it to, this becomes a major engine for learning, for security, for product market fit. Getting good at detection is one of the things that's really worth investing in. Detection and response over prevention. So now we're in a really interesting environment. We took a change. It surprised us. We figured out why it surprised us. And now in this moment in time, we have perfect clarity about how to be better software developers over a very small space. But for right now, we know that we needed a graph that we didn't have. We needed to not be making changes on Friday when everybody had already gone home. We have perfect clarity. And it's so rare in our environment to ever have perfect clarity about how to be improved. This work is incredibly important. You have to prioritize it. Is the single most important thing you can be doing as an organization if you want to be making sustainable long-term change. The rule at Etsy is you have 30 days. You have 30 days. It doesn't matter what else you're doing. If we had a postmortem, we have remediation items, you have 30 days. If you do not prioritize this work, you will not be a learning organization. You will slow down over time. Software will continue to be painful and expensive to build. Reflection is painful. It's always painful. It's a hard phase. And investment is expensive. It's a bunch of time spent doing things that are not core to our mission. And the only way we can afford to be sort of taking this whole learning approach is if we teach. We teach the rest of our organizations. We teach our industry. When we get down at the end of the day, as an organization, can we now move faster and take greater risks with confidence? If not, we can't reasonably invest in this. It is not sort of a let 1,000 flowers bloom, which is, by the way, is a title of a talk by an ex-Etsy engineer who runs the engineering effectiveness now at Twitter. We can't afford, as organizations, to have this diversity of solutions. We need to be investing in teaching, having the one true way as organizations that evolves over time with this process, but there is still a true way. And then you do it again. You do it again and again and again. And hopefully you do it faster and with higher confidence and taking greater risks, and you get better. And this is what learning as a software organization, learning as a technology organization looks like. Now, some of these practices might sound familiar, which is great. Sound a lot like Agile, Lean, a little bit like the CFA best practices. There's certainly some overlaps. The goals are slightly different. Agile is a practice to increase the success rate of software development. Lean is a practice to increase the chance of finding product market fit. We care about learning. And it's important that you're clear on what you're trying to do and what you're trying to prioritize. So in summary, we're bad at software. Your current answers are wrong, and failure is inevitable. You need a culture that supports learning. You need to be able to subvert failure. Thank you.